What the hell are you staring at, you vanilla midget?
Feel like you're being watched this holiday season? Well, don't. With Surfshark VPN. Surfshark encrypts your private data to help keep you safe, even on public Wi-Fi. It blocks malware and doesn't track your online activity. Binge watch Netflix over the holidays with ultimate freedom. Jump between thousands of servers all over the world to watch how you want without geo-restrictions. Give yourself the gift of Surfshark. Use the promo code WREGRET to get 84% off your order, and for a limited time, get 4 extra months for free.
Who sent you anyway? Was it the Mauve? Greg Muttonfist? Meltzer?
Hey, let's do it for the content. Macaran, let's go. Let's get it. Dick Kick City. It gets gritty when Mega Ran come through. The kid gets busy. Work yourself into a shoot, but you know it's legit. Like what you like, just don't be a dick. Hey, wrestling with regret. Let's get it. Yeah. What's that scent? Maybe you should bottle it. Drink it and spray it on. Get Claude to model it. 8 years in, can't look back. Who else can make velour sweatsuits look whack? Wrestling with regret. Let's get it. Yeah.
2020 was a devastating year for professional wrestling for a variety of reasons, and as we all began to climb our way back up in 2021, wrestlers and fans alike were still hit with plenty of big problems, proving that when it comes to the good and the bad, a year is just a number. And this week, I'm going to rank the top 16 worst things to happen to pro wrestling in the year 2021. Oh yeah, this one's going to suck. Number 16, The Miz, WWE Champion. The last few years of WWE programming has seen the era of the dominant champion, guys holding on to belts for months and months at a time to build credibility for themselves and the championship. And then, there was The Miz. After beating Otis for the Money in the Bank briefcase the previous year, boy, remember Otis's huge push? The Miz finally cashed in on Drew McIntyre at Elimination Chamber, shocking the world and becoming a 2-time WWE champion, his first in 11 years. It was a cool accomplishment, and honestly, I was genuinely happy for The Miz there. I always wanted him to get another shot at the title in a post-John Cena landscape where he could possibly do to that belt what he did with the IC title years ago. And in the time I've taken to say all that, The Miz lost the championship. After only 8 days with the title, Miz was promptly squashed by Bobby Lashley on Raw and didn't get anywhere near the title again for the rest of the year, and at this rate probably won't ever again. It was such a bold-faced transitional reign, even Mick Foley would have cringed at it. Seeing guys like McIntyre and Lashley and now Big E holding the championship so dominantly over the last couple of years has been cool to see, but at the same time, The Miz's reign was so cartoonishly short, I don't even think it happened. You would have been better off doing an awkward handoff with the title than what we saw. Oh, and speaking of titles, number 15, New Japan's ugly cursed world championship. Not too long ago, New Japan Pro Wrestling was the critical darling of the wrestling world, but that reputation's taken a bit of a hit in the last couple of years, what with their most popular foreign stars leaving, injuries, and of course all that pandemic-related madness. If only there was some kind of object, some kind of symbol that really encapsulated all the problems New Japan was going through lately. Ah, there it is! Way back in January, Kota Ibushi beat Tetsuya Naito to win both the IWGP Heavyweight and Intercontinental Championships. By March, Ibushi unified the belts to create the IWGP World Heavyweight title. The new design's meant to incorporate past designs of the old belts, but if you want my opinion, in its brief history, the singular world title has already seen a lot of upheaval, and if you're the sort of person who believes in that sort of thing, it might even be cursed. After losing the title to Will Ospreay in his first defense, Ibushi went down with a severe illness, before coming back and immediately separating his shoulder in the G1 final. Meanwhile, Ospreay made it to exactly one defense before vacating the championship due to a neck injury. The belts finally found some stability in the form of Shingo Takagi, who's held on to it since June. Is the title cursed? Too tough to call, but for a belt that's meant to symbolize a bold new era, it's had a rough start of things. But let's hope New Japan can bounce back and regain some of the momentum they lost the last couple of years in 2022. Number 14, Nikki ASH. When Alexa Bliss turned into a spooky little girl and broke up her tag team with Nikki Cross, it was uncertain just how Nikki would bounce back. There was always the option of having her go back to her wild days of NXT, but fans who were hoping for that were a bit disappointed, I'm sure. In June of this year, Cross was repackaged as Nikki ASH, or Almost a Superhero. A creation of her own design, it was meant to inspire kids that they could achieve anything in life, even if they didn't have superpowers. Though the character change was a little jarring, it paid quick dividends as she won the Money in the Bank briefcase, then beat Charlotte Flair for the women's title the next night on Raw. But then Nikki fell into the trap of being booked as a naive babyface who lost all the time even while still champion. She soon lost the women's title at SummerSlam, but rebounded by winning the women's tag titles with Rhea Ripley. During that time, she was booked as a loser and the weak link of the team before they ended their 2-month nothing burger reign. What an inspiration! I'm totally in favor of characters like Nikki's, but the execution has to be done a certain way in order for it to work. Take the Hurricane, for example. He was played up for laughs and lost a lot at first, but that's because he was originally a heel. But when Nikki's trying to inspire people to better themselves and she winds up looking dumb every week, it's not going to get the desired results. Though it began with the noblest of intentions, Nikki, almost a superhero, has been definitely a bust. Number 13, American Top Team versus the Inner Circle. If you've watched me for long enough, you know that Chris Jericho is pretty much my favorite wrestler of all time. I have more to say about that in this video right here, but this particular angle in 2021, well, it wasn't one of his best. Earlier in the year, American Top Team coach Dan Lambert came to AEW as sort of a Jim Cornette proxy, a cranky old man who doesn't like all this weird new stuff the kids are into these days. Eventually, Lambert brought his buddies from the UFC, they locked in on Chris Jericho and the Inner Circle, and a war was born. Despite the angle's relatively brief existence, it was one of the worst AEW had done all year. As opposed to other faction wars we'd seen in the company for the last couple of years, the only two people who really benefited from this thing were Chris Jericho and Dan Lambert, two guys who didn't really need the extra exposure, as they were constantly taunting each other and their opposing team members with sophomore jabs and insults that belonged back in 2001, not 2021. The blow-off match of Full Gear was entertaining, but not always for the right reasons. It might have also been a little overkill on the weapons, considering the Super Click, Christian Cage, and the Jurassic Express had just done that earlier in the night and done better. Of all the angles we saw in AEW this year, this is one I could have done without. Number 12, the fall and rise and fall of Ric Flair. As far as retired wrestlers go, Ric Flair kept himself pretty busy for a lot of 2021. He began the year working for WWE, aligning himself with Lacey Evans for whatever reason in her feud with Charlotte Flair, but then that angle was cut short when Lacey was legitimately pregnant. And somewhat surprisingly, they did not turn it into a paternity angle involving the Nature Boy. Then Flair requested and was granted his release from the company, which meant he could finally go pursue all those business deals he'd been unable to do while under contract. He showed up in Mexico and threw down with Andrade. He gave an emotional speech at the NWA's anniversary show. He even kept selling his weird cream cheese bites. Then came that fateful episode of Dark Side of the Ring. The docuseries covered the infamous 2002 plane ride from hell, of which Flair was a big part of it. Though the incident was well known in an abstract sense, not everyone knew of Flair's alleged sexual assault of a female flight attendant, which led to a lawsuit that was settled out of court by WWE. Flair's denied all the allegations, but the resurgence of the story was enough to put his solo tour on ice and for WWE to completely unperson him. Who knows if Flair will ever bounce back from this, but history shows that legends never truly get canceled. They just have to hang around for the reboot. There's still hope for you yet, Tommy Dreamer? Number 11, WoW and Tessa Blanchard. It's generally a red flag when a very talented wrestler fails to find contracted work, and one of our most recent examples of this is Tessa Blanchard. Despite being good at what she does in the ring, she's also been dogged with complaints of having an attitude problem for years. Oh yeah, then came last year when Tessa was called out for making racist comments toward a black colleague, and it was verified by multiple people, yet she categorically denied everything. Yeah, that'll do it. Since leaving Impact last year as their world champion, Tessa spent months out of the spotlight with no clear path to get back in the mainstream. I mean, when your dad works for one of the bigger companies in this country and can't get you work, maybe it's time for inward thinking. Then news broke earlier this year that Women of Wrestling, or WOW, was coming back. The spiritual successor to Glow got its start back in the early 2000s, but after 20 years and one or two revivals over the years, it was considered to be dead. They announced that WOW was getting a TV deal, and AJ Mendez even staged her return to wrestling in a leadership role. But it's all very obvious this whole thing is designed to revolve around Blanchard, as she's the only active name announced for it at this point, and her job duties also involve casting director. And allegedly, one of the early creative pitches involved Tessa and La Rosa Negra, the alleged recipient of Tessa's racism, doing an angle based off said incident, which kind of flies in the face of Tessa's claims that the incident didn't happen, right? So is WOW being revived for the good of women's wrestling or for just one wrestling woman? Hard to say for sure at this point, but by building their company around someone as controversial and toxic as Tessa, this rebuilt version of WOW may already be on loose foundation. Number 10, the downfall of NXT Black and Gold. It's safe to say that WWE's initial response to AEW's existence was a little bit heavy-handed, and their desire to crush AEW before they even got out the gate ended up costing them arguably their best show. NXT sacrificed a lot of its unique charm in an attempt to lure eyes away from Dynamite, and it wound up backfiring even before the pandemic struck. Except for 1 or 2 weeks, Dynamite won the ratings war despite NXT swinging for the fences with takeover quality matches on free TV. Eventually, NXT caved and moved to Tuesdays, but somehow it got even worse. Things took a real dive this past summer when NXT champion Karrion Kross lost a match clean to Jeff Hardy on Raw for zero reason, got punked out by Adam Cole and never recovered, then got a mercy killing at the hands of Samoa Joe, who has also fallen off the face of the earth. And finally, almost the moment Triple H went under the knife to treat a heart problem, NXT underwent a radical rebranding as NXT 2.0. Literally given a new coat of paint that feels suspiciously close to Dynamite's old look, the show's dumped much of its established roster in favor of a new class of characters. 2.0 has its own strengths and weaknesses, but we're not talking about that here. The real story is how this makeover symbolized a huge overhaul and drastic change of WWE's entire developmental policy, one that may take us years to see the end result of. And in the short term, for fans of the original black and gold NXT, it was a heartbreaking change of pace. Number 9. Mr. McMahon's Missing Egg. WWE has had cheesy sponsored segments in their programming for decades at this point, but 2021 was the year they began to actually affect storylines. I've already talked about the zombie lumberjacks from WrestleMania Backlash in a different countdown, but this next entry did not go over easy. Survivor Series was heavily billed as the 25th anniversary of The Rock's wrestling career. With so much emphasis on the Great One, you'd think we'd see him show up like The Undertaker did for his 30th the previous year. Unfortunately, Rocky was on the other side of the world filming Young Rock, so his stand-in was the Cleopatra egg prop from his latest film and the show's sponsor, Red Notice. Just as good. Ignoring for a moment the company's history with egg-based storylines, they dedicated a ton of pay-per-view time to this glorified movie commercial, all for the egg to have been stolen and no Rock to boot, and you wonder why the fans were disappointed. And then on Raw the next night, when it was time to reveal who took the egg, it turned out to be Austin Theory, who was rewarded with a title match later that night. So what, if somebody hijacks Vince McMahon's private jet, he gets the main event WrestleMania? Even if The Rock physically couldn't be at the pay-per-view, at the very least, this silly MacGuffin could have led to something more than what ended up happening. In a way, it's a perfect microcosm of WWE in 2021. Instead of trying to organically create compelling content, it's just one cash grab to another to fill the company's seemingly bottomless coffers. Number 8. The Queen's Crown Tournament. It wasn't too long ago that WWE put a lot of time, money, and effort into what they were calling the Women's Revolution. It was their concerted effort to give more ladies more TV times that could have more credibility and legitimacy. And though you could argue whether or not they actually accomplished that goal, what you can say is that this next entry came about 3 or 4 years too late to the party. After years of fans asking for it, WWE finally held the Queen's Crown Tournament, which ran concurrently with a returning King of the Ring during the fall of this year. But an event that was seemingly designed to highlight and promote their female talent didn't do too much of either. Throughout this 8-woman tournament, not a single match went above 3 minutes, except for the finals in which Zelina Vega beat Doudrop, which went a whopping 6. Meanwhile, the King of the Ring tournament was frequently putting out bangers in the first couple of rounds. A single match in the men's tourney often went longer than the entire first round of the women's. Now, I'm not going to come out here and pretend that AEW's been doing a real bang-up job with their women's division compared to WWE's, but at least their women's tournament happening at around the same time has been done a whole lot better. For a first of its kind like Queen's Crown was, it all felt like a massive afterthought and flies in the face of what the company was trying to accomplish only a couple of years ago. Number 7. Becky Lynch vs. Bianca Belair at SummerSlam. Bianca Belair had been a standout performer on the main roster all year, having won the Royal Rumble, then beating Sasha Banks for the SmackDown Women's title in a great match at WrestleMania. A rematch was set for SummerSlam, but at the very last moment, it was announced that the boss was unable to compete for unknown reasons. But the company had an ace up its sleeve for a replacement as Becky Lynch returned after a 15-month absence. Fans went banana, but in one of the biggest rug pulls of the year, Becky won the match and the title in seconds to mass confusion. It wasn't clear at the time, but it turned out to be the beginning of a heel turn for Bex, but why turn your most popular woman's star and make her opponent look like a total chump in one fell swoop? It's bad enough that it seems the only way WWE knows how to generate heat anymore is to give fans something they want, then to immediately take it away from them over and over again. But the fact that a lot of people on social media were able to figure out where this was going in the immediate aftermath of that match shows that the people in a creative standpoint might want to reconsider their positions. Similar to the last time they tried turning Becky heel, it hasn't quite stuck the way they'd hoped, and they completely sacrificed the momentum of one of their brightest new stars in the process. Hope it was worth it for the OMG moment, but to me, the last thing WWE needed was a heel Becky Lynch. Number 6. Toxic fans. Hey there, obnoxious tribal fans. You know who I'm talking to. You folks who are locked in this eternal with us or against us holy war between WWE and AEW. The ones who find the weakest, shittiest, flimsiest excuses to attack either company. The ones who want to lecture wrestlers about loyalty and who want to harass certain YouTubers for picking a family vacation over going to watch All Out. Guess what, fuckheads? You guys made the list for the third year in a row. Give yourselves a hand, and thank you so much for making social media such a fucking cesspool, you weirdos. Number 5, the exploding barbed wire deathmatch. AEW's 2020 ended with Kenny Omega as its world champion after having defeated Jon Moxley in controversial fashion. By February the next year, this war escalated past the point of no return, so things got barbaric at the Revolution pay-per-view with the exploding barbed wire deathmatch. Though it's been a big thing in Japan since the rise of FMW, a match like this has rarely been done in America, and even more rarely done well. But with the combined visions of Moxley, Omega, and Tony Khan, not to mention AEW's vast budget, surely this one will be different, right? The match itself was fine as Omega went on to pin Moxley to retain, but it wasn't until after the bell when things got awkward. With seconds to go before the big kaboom, friend-turned-rival Eddie Kingston rushed the ring and shielded Moxley from the impending blast. But in the end, the only thing he was hiding John from was embarrassment, as the so-called explosion totally whiffed and failed to even remotely live up to expectations. Yet somehow, Eddie still sold for it. Onita and Funk, this was not. Omega and Don Callis cut a promo that week taking credit for the pyro botch, and Eddie cited a panic attack for passing out, but all the explanations in the world couldn't help AEW from briefly becoming a laughingstock over this. It was a very ambitious attempt by the young company, but the idea was a little too extra for its own good and definitely underdelivered after being way oversold. Number 4, Hannibal almost murders a referee. One of the first lessons a wrestler learns as they begin training is to protect not only themselves, but the people they work with in the ring. And earlier this month, in this late entry, a longtime veteran wrestler who really should have known better blatantly violated rule number 1. Devin Nicholson, aka Hannibal from the YouTube channel Hannibal TV, recently worked a show in Texas under a mask with the name Bloodhunter. Hannibal, whose biggest claim to fame was suing Abdul the Butcher for giving him hepatitis C several years ago, was seen on camera a week or so ago beating the hell out of a referee after a match. According to those who were there, the plan was for the referee to cut himself during the attack, but Hannibal apparently got impatient and started stabbing the guy in the head with a spike. Also worth mentioning about this disgusting display that took place in front of children, as well as the ref's own daughter, Hannibal was allegedly drunk when he went nuts on the poor ref, even cutting an artery. And as the referee nearly bled out, Nicholson's manager Kevin Sullivan was heard telling a frantic crew to, quote, kayfabe the cops. Well, it turns out not even a pandemic could keep carny, shindy bullshit like this from going down for the count. You know, Hannibal has been known to do some wart shoots over the years with guys like Terry Funk and Lanny Poffo, but none of those incidents involved the victim going to the hospital to get staples to close their life-threatening wounds. A planned segment where a referee bleeds on its own is not terrible, but the fact that Hannibal blatantly went too far and nearly killed the guy is a complete violation of trust and respect to do what he did, especially since he was allegedly in no condition to perform. And as for Kevin Sullivan, if it's true what he said, he should suffer consequences as well. It's 2021, almost 22. What are we doing still trying to protect the business like that at that extent, even at the expense of a referee who put his trust in another wrestler's hands and almost died as a result? No thanks. Hey Devin, hope you're able to monetize all that heel heat you're getting, you prick. Number 3, Bray Wyatt, Alexa Bliss, and Lily. Since debuting in 2019, Bray Wyatt's Fiend character was a source of constant intrigue and scrutiny from fans and pundits alike. With every twist and turn, people wanted to know where the story was heading, but I don't think anyone could have predicted what happened in 2021. Early in the year, Alexa Bliss was fighting Randy Orton for the Fiend's honor, who had recently been set ablaze in the Firefly Inferno match. At Fastlane, Crisp E Fiend made his dramatic return, and soon the blow-off was set for WrestleMania in Tampa. Fans witnessed a sequence in which the partially melted Fiend suddenly transformed into his whole self again, then emerged from a giant jack-in-the-box to a massive ovation. After a few minutes of the Fiend doing his usual no-selling act, suddenly Alexa popped out from the same box Bray was in, though was now bleeding black goo for some reason, before Orton won with a single RKO. Alexa and Bray looked at each other for a little bit, the lights cut out, and that was pretty much it for those two as an item. Welp. With Bray out of the picture from here on out, WWE tried their best to Okay, well, they tried to keep Alexa scary in her own way. She introduced us to her spooky doll Lily, which she says she'd had since childhood, yet still looked to be in impeccable shape. The doll itself possessed some magical powers as well. It could hypnotize people, stand up on its own, and even wink. It was so terrifying, it even put the fear of God in Shayna Baszler in a very cheesy pre-taped segment. Then in Extreme Rules, Charlotte beat Alexa in a match, beat her a little more after the bell, then destroyed Lily. Alexa cried as she tried her best to get her Alka-Seltzer tablet to foam up, and as of press time, that's the last you've seen of Bliss or her doll. The utterly confusing way The Fiend was handled those last few months of his run deserves its own entry, but then the addition of Alexa Bliss and her inheritance of the supernatural gimmick under WWE's full creative control, that brought things to a whole new level. If what we saw at Extreme Rules was meant to be some kind of hard reset and a doing away of The Fiend stuff entirely, then honestly, it's for the best at this point. Number 2, Ring of Honor goes on hiatus. It is not opinion, but it is fact that Ring of Honor is the most influential wrestling company in the last 20 years. Just about everything fans love today about professional wrestling has its origins in those 3 letters. So it was especially heartbreaking to learn that the company may be gone for good. In November, ROH declared it would go on hiatus after the Final Battle pay-per-view after months of bleeding money and running empty arena shows amidst the pandemic. ROH spared no expense in keeping its talent as safe as possible while providing programming for its fans and keeping people signed, but all those expenses added up to the point where their parent company, Sinclair Broadcasting, said no more. All the contracted talent's being released, and there are currently no shows planned until Supercard of Honor in April, and assuming that still happens, who even knows what that might look like? Though the company did have a rough last few years for a variety of reasons, it's still kind of shocking that ROH as we know it is gone for good. I mean, for many, it was their home. It was the place that put them on the map, not to mention the memories and the impact it was made on fans for all those years. And after all this time, throughout all the ups and the downs, to think it was ultimately all brought down by the fact that ROH was trying to do right by its talent. No spoilers or anything, but it makes the next entry in this countdown seem especially callous. I will always be grateful to Ring of Honor for the opportunities they've given me for the last 2 years as an interviewer and commentator. They've given me career moments that I will never forget. But more importantly, I'm grateful, as we all should be grateful, that ROH was here in the first place. Without Ring of Honor, pro wrestling as we know it today would look and feel drastically different, and I would argue not for the better. Whether or not Ring of Honor truly goes away, its impact and its legacy will live forever in its alumni and the fans they made along the way. And the number 1 worst thing about wrestling in 2021 was WWE's Wrestler Dump. I was considering putting ROH at number 1 on this countdown, but I chose not to for 2 reasons. 1, as of this time, ROH isn't dead quite yet. And number 2, at least they tried. The same cannot be said, though, for WWE this year. When they released dozens of wrestlers and producers last year in the wake of the pandemic, it was only the beginning. This year, the company really outdid itself, laying off more than 80 people at the time I'm recording this. You can make your own damned company with that many folks. And they didn't just fire jobbers or people languishing in catering with nothing to do. They cut announcers, mid-carders, referees, main eventers, former world champions, people they just signed, people who were just on television, people who had performed at that year's WrestleMania. Gone, gone, gone. A lot of these cuts even impacted active storylines. Just so little rhyme or reason as to why all these people were cut, unless you support the theory that many of them were done to erase the Triple H era of developmental. And the real kicker is that most of these releases were due to budget cuts while the company kept making record profits. Now, it is possible to make money and keep cutting your budget to save more money, but who does that help besides those up top? Great, you saved some money, but what about the morale of your locker room? All those wrestlers who are still there, a lot of their friends are gone for no reason, and they know they might be next. What a fantastic environment to work in. All these cuts have done is showcase just how backwards WWE's hiring philosophy has been for the last several years. Just sign everyone they could, even if they had no plans for them, then cut them because they're all just lines on a budget sheet to Nick Khan. What was the point of all those hires if not to spite other companies or cripple the independent scene? Oh right, I suppose WWE doesn't need that anymore. I'm pretty sure most of the wrestlers who are released will be okay. The indie scene's opening back up, other companies are always hiring, and in a select few cases, some of them may never have to wrestle another day in their lives. But for disappointing the fans, disheartening the performers, and for fostering a dismal attitude of nothing matters anymore, WWE's mass releases have been the worst thing about wrestling in 2021. I'm sure I missed a few things, so let me know about that in the comments section below. And stay tuned for 2 weeks from now because we're kicking off 2022 with the best of what happened this year in wrestling. Will I find as many good things as I did bad? Who knows? But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.